McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Season 4, Episode 5, Vials of Blood That Glow in the Dark. October 19th, 1921, continued. Beep! The last thing I wanted was to be caught by the two men arguing in the lobby of the Goresby Hotel, so I pinched my nose, prayed the tingle in my nose would go away, and that I wouldn't sneeze and doom myself to death. Meanwhile, I edged further under the counter, out of sight, and I pricked up my ears with rabbit-like precision. I had to hear the rest of this conversation. "That's why we should be working on this now, I tell you," a male voice had just said. "We have some of Mr. McGillicuddy's blood. That means I can track him to anywhere on the planet, no matter what year they're hiding in." "Look, this is all a theory," came a voice that sounded strangely familiar. "It isn't just a theory," the first voice snapped. "I used Noble James's blood to find him inside a murder object, and then in the next murder object he tried to hide in. I didn't just find him, I found him in time. I traced him anywhere." So I was listening to Raster. I got goosebumps. Sometimes my luck is rotten, but sometimes it's positively literary. I suddenly remembered the voice of the man he was arguing with as well. It was Renfield, the sneeze of a human being who had tricked me into the Night Enthusiast cave for the very first time. "You keep claiming that," Renfield said, "but it all sounds like rot to me. So you claim you found Noble James inside of two separate murder objects. Well, then where is Noble James? And why can't you find him now?" Raster hissed, irritated. "I've told you. Something has gone wrong. Now the magic is saying that Noble James isn't on our world, past, present, or future. It's telling me he's off the planet." "So it doesn't work," Renfield said. "How about," Raster said, "instead of arguing about why Noble James appears suddenly to be hiding on the planet Mars, we instead act pragmatically and use my magic again, on a subject we know we can trace. I have Mr. McGillicuddy's blood, from when he was in our prison. They stole him back, but we can get him again in 5 minutes. Wherever they're hiding now, and I don't care where it is, I can cast this spell to find them." "So see if you can do it," Renfield said. "Then come to me and Ariana. Don't jabber at me without proof. I tell you, I want to see a photograph of Mr. McGillicuddy with his bandages on before we decide to do anything so drastic." "Idiot," Raster said. "We have to be ready, all of us. We have to have our army together. We have to leave at the same time. Wherever I find out they're hiding, we have to be ready to jump there at once." "Well, where are they hiding?" Renfield said. "I haven't tried it yet." "Why not?" "Well, because it's expensive. And if they're on the move, we'll want to head to their location as soon as the results come in. I'm telling you, put in a good word for me to Ariana. This blood thing works. Whatever murder object they're hiding in, we will be able to find it." "I don't think Ariana will listen to you," Renfield said, opening the door. "Oh?" Their voices grew fainter as they stepped outside. "Why not?" "Because she's keen on that Merkel girl." "Ugh. How did we ever—" At that point, their voices faded, and I was left feeling slapped. My chest ached, like I'd just taken a bullet, and I sort of wanted to suck my thumb, or pet a dog, or sit on the edge of a dock and pity myself for about 8 hours. "Hurry up, Maud," was all I said to myself in the end. "His room is empty." I got up, and I hurried up the staircase. I was pretty sure I was going to get a rash from the carpet I'd been sitting on, but that didn't matter now. I creeped my way up the damp-smelling stairs, and I ran into a little old woman at the top. She glowered at me and slammed her door, but I saw that her eyes were green, not hazel, so she wasn't a magic unusual. This building wasn't all Night Enthusiasts, then. Perhaps only Ariana and Raster lived here, and Renfield was just coming by for a visit. I walked down the hall as fast as I could, and I read the nameplates on the doors. Each hotel room had a nameplate, which told me that this place was more of an apartment building than a hotel now. I wondered who would choose to live here, on purpose, and then I remembered that Ariana did. Well, I already knew that she made terrible decisions. I wondered if she'd lived here for a long time, if this was what she'd come home to before she started tricking me and spending the night in McGillicuddy and Murder's pawnshop. I reached the end of the hallway, and I spotted the name Raster on a nameplate. I stood there for an extra 20 seconds, my fingers hovering above the doorknob, afraid to turn it. What if someone else was in his room? What if that wasn't Raster I'd heard downstairs, and Raster was in here, sitting on his bed, and he'd chop my head off as soon as I poked my head inside? I finally decided to get over myself and opened the door, but of course it was locked. In the end, that was an encouraging sign. It meant that Raster wasn't planning on coming back in the next 5 minutes. Then again, in a building this sour, perhaps even your neighbours would burgle you if you left your door unlocked. Since I couldn't walk in, I peeped through the keyhole, took a gander of the room, and teleported inside. The room was blessedly empty. To my surprise, it wasn't too ugly either. The wallpaper was dark purple with black stripes and flowers, and the bed was clean and neat. This room didn't smell like mold. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary lying around, so I went straight to the closet. Here I had better luck. Raster didn't have his clothes hung up. He had a closet full of crystals and skulls and heavy slashes of black ointment, and 3 tiny vials full of dried blood. I held my breath. I sensed a dark energy coming from the objects, like I'd stumbled into the lair of an old-fashioned witch. The vials glowed softly, too. Magic unusual blood, then. Why is there something so evil about meddling with nature, getting in the way of the natural order of things? Something feels wrong and ominous about witchcraft. But perhaps that's because it all has to do with death. I mean, think about it. Witches didn't make potions out of light or pollen or spring water. It was all the liver of a toad, and skulls, and blood and hair, and things you can usually only get if you've mutilated and killed. On that note, the night enthusiasts do get their power from mutilation. They gain added spell power by murdering their empathy to become night enthusiasts. They handicap their own souls on purpose to get a boost in magic. Perhaps that's how everyone does it. The night enthusiasts, witches, the Whiskelets. Perhaps the Whiskelets say death to all mice, kill the mice, and from the power from all those deaths, they can create an opulent world too lavish for them to ever make use of. What a horrible thought. What a pointless nightmare. Well, anyway, I stared down at Raster's magic spell, and I couldn't make any sense of it. What I could make sense of, however, was the fact that the 3 vials of dried blood were neatly labelled and sitting in a row. One had mere flakes of blood in it. This one was labelled Noel James. And I realized Raster must have collected the dried blood 1 scratch at a time from the dagger that he'd used to stab Noble with under the bridge. The other vials were full, cloudy with dark red, shimmering with soft luminescence. They were labelled Wrath and Mr. McGillicuddy. I thought it was curious that Raster wasn't just as keen to trace Wrath as he was to trace Mr. McGillicuddy. Did he think we'd left Wrath in a gutter somewhere? Perhaps he assumed Wrath would have run away from us. Either way, I couldn't have him tracing Wrath either. With shaking fingers, I took all 3 vials and put them in my pocket. If Raster didn't have the blood, he couldn't perform the spell. We were safe from him, as long as I had all the blood and he had none. I suddenly began to worry that he would go back to Wrath's prison cell and scrape the blood off the walls. Maybe I would have to send a team of magic unusuals back to the Night Enthusiast prison with a bucket of soap and some brushes. Now that I had the vials of blood, I didn't want to stay in Raster's room a minute longer. I shut the closet door and teleported back into the hallway. So far, my mission had been a brilliant one. I'd stopped Raster's ability to trace Noble James, which meant that I could move on to one of my biggest worries, rescuing Noble and Octavia from the Whiskelet cave. If Raster couldn't find Noble anymore, then Noble was free to hide with the rest of us. I felt cheered, suddenly. I felt like I was unraveling my problems as quickly as they came at me. That was, of course, a sign that something was about to go horribly wrong. I walked down to the other end of the hallway. There, I found a nameplate for Ariana. Like I was in Wonderland, and things were going just so. I was finding all the doorways and characters that I was supposed to. This time, when I tried the door, it was unlocked, but Ariana wasn't anywhere inside. The room was gloomy. It made me sad. When I'd introduced myself to her at the park all those weeks ago, she'd taken me to someone else's house to trick me into thinking that she lived somewhere normal. I realized now it had just been the random house of some old woman. It had put images into my mind of cleanliness, care, lace doilies, and a sense of calm. In reality, Ariana's room seemed to be the abode of someone who hated themselves. Everything smelled stale. The bed was unmade. She threw her things on top of the bureau instead of folding them and putting them inside. I began to go through her pockets, which felt strangely like an invasion of her privacy. Possibly because it was. Suddenly, I recognized Octavia's dress, the one Ariana had stolen for her disguise back in the Whiskelit cave. I checked the pockets. My hands closed around a small thimble, which was a murder object, and the vial of magic jelly. I took the vial out and looked at it. It was nearly full. Not quite, but nearly. To the best of my knowledge, there wasn't any missing. Besides, it was still in the pocket. Ariana clearly hadn't been using this. Either she was being sloppy in the extreme, or she figured the safest hiding spot was in her dirty laundry, or she felt guilty about taking advantage of my gift. It was the second time Ariana had done something stupid and passive when it came to defeating the pawnshop. She wanted to be a leader, but her heart wasn't in it. It wouldn't be long before the night enthusiasts ate her alive. I pocketed the magic jelly. I couldn't believe my luck. First Raster's blood vials, and now this. I could do what Ariana wanted. I could hole up with my team of magic unusuals, and we could hide in the 1800s forever, and we could never live in our own world anymore. We could let the night enthusiasts have it. Of course, that was a miserable thought. Passively letting our world burn while we hid in a time that wasn't our own? We're born when we're born to make something of the world we live in, and magic unusuals are bound by magic to keep us from interfering with the past. We can show up and have conversations, but we can't willingly alter events. Hiding in the past meant a life of nothingness, without purpose, without something to offer the world. For that alone, we deserved to make 1921 a better world. We've got to get organized, I muttered to myself. We have to find some way of finishing the night enthusiasts once and for all. Of course, we were a long way from organized. I suddenly realized that I was the de facto leader at the moment, something I tried not to think about because it didn't make any sense. Diary, sometimes without meaning to, I bring people together, and then I look at myself in the mirror and think that I'm incapable. I'm a natural-born leader who hates herself. A terrible combination. But I had to own up to the fact that Mr. McGillicuddy was out of commission, that everyone looked up to me. What would you do if you believed you could, Belinda Maudie Merkel? I muttered to myself. What incredible changes would you make if you weren't so stressed about looking like a failure? It was a good question, but I distracted myself from the answer by leaving Ariana's room. This is where I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I should have teleported straight out of the Goresby Hotel and never come back. But I'd had such good luck in Raster and Ariana's rooms that I wanted to see what else I could find. I left Ariana's room the natural way by turning the doorknob, and when I stepped into the hall, I began examining the other nameplates. The other names meant nothing to me, but I began to itch with curiosity about them. How many other night enthusiasts lived in this building? Many? No more than 2? What else might I find? Be able to pickpocket if I scurried into a few more rooms. I idly tapped my fingers against a doorknob, thinking of prying again, when something sharp and heavy hit me in the forearm. "Ouch!" I yelped. I whirled around, ready for a full-on battle with night enthusiasts, only to find the little old woman scowling at me. She'd just thrown a broken jam jar at me. A jam jar that was already broken. The glass edge had sliced me royally open on the forearm, and I was drooling blood. "What on earth?" I roared. "You're the police, ain't you?" the woman said. "We don't like the police. Police should get away from here." "If I was the police, what on earth are you doing assaulting an officer?" I cried. "If I was the police, I could get you arrested." "You can't do nothing because you're only a girl," the old woman said. She paused. "You're not the police?" My arm was drooling hot red stuff. I grabbed my hanky and mopped it up, then pressed the cloth into the dent in my skin. Cleaning up the blood gave me time to think up a decent lie. "I'm here with a charity," I said. "I think these are unsafe living conditions." This was all perfectly true. "I'm here to investigate the building and interview some of the residents." "Well, we hate charity even more than the police." This woman seemed very happy to speak for the entire building. Get! We don't need charity. Look at this gorgeous hotel. It's spankers. Get out of my hallway." I was done. If this woman was going to eye me for the rest of my snooping and continue to hurl jam jars at me, then it was time to go. I glanced down at the jam jar in dismay, and only then did I realize that some of my blood had dripped into the carpet. "Get!" "All right," I snapped. The old woman watched me all the way out of the building. She followed me down the stairs and stood in the doorway. When I finally reached an alley, out of sight, I groaned and teleported. I sat down on a bench in a public park and wrapped up the wound so it wouldn't get all over my clothes. Then I put my head in my hands and had a full-on panic attack. I told myself it wasn't enough. There was no way the blood could be used to trace me. Raster hadn't seen that bloodstain. Only the old woman had. The old woman wasn't a magic unusual, which I knew because her eyes weren't right. The blood had mingled with the purple of the carpet. It was barely visible. Most importantly, I didn't even look like Melinda Marty Merkel. I looked like some random lady with a lot more nose. It would be worse to go back, I told myself. It would be worse to go back. I would be putting myself in greater danger by showing up there again, especially when Raster is about to find his vials missing. The blood on the carpet means nothing. They'll never connect it to me. At least, diary. That is what I told myself. We hope you've enjoyed Season 4, Episode 5, Vials of Blood That Glow in the Dark, of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawnshop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawnshop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren, all rights reserved. Please subscribe, share it with your friends, and visit minervasweeneywren.com for more. The most impactful way to support McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawnshop is to simply follow Minerva Sweeney Wren at Meg Macaulay Inc. on Instagram and Twitter. Please consider giving $1 a month at patreon.com/SweeneyWren to unlock the upcoming mystery, The Dark and Decrepit Planet of Spin. All links are in the description of this episode. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawnshop will continue in 2 weeks with Season 4, Episode 6. This Way to Find the Bodies.